chief technology officer in a company today. 20 years back, it was not there. And today, while the technology folks are doing quite well, and to the point you said, today process should focus not just on standardization, but also delight and how do we customize in the context of standardization. So one of the questions I thought I'll initiate back with you is, given that business processes cut across and innovations happen in business processes, and as you rightly said, technology is very much integral part of business process, because today, while it is separately seen, at least in our last 15-20 years of experience, IT and business processes have kind of come together. So the point of view which I wanted to initiate the dialogue is, how do you see as you said, there are certain critical processes, but even when, if you talk about Indian organizations, I'm not even talking about multinational, do you think they are focused enough on the business process today? One is people who are very clear, like multinationals, but there are a lot of Indian organizations, and based on your experience, how do you see them? Do they focus on the process? Is there a need? Is the time mature now for a chief process officer who really integrate across the company in terms of business process with a delight in mind? At the end of the day, not just to standardize. Just thought you may like to give your comments.
So I would say that I struggle with this concept, because how are organizations structured? They're structured by function, they're structured by geography, they're structured by business unit, or profit unit, etc. They're not structured by process.
Correct.
Process is an underpinning thing which cuts across any which way you organize it. What you definitely need is to ensure that you have robust processes.
Yes.
Especially in a world of compliance and governance. So you need robustness in processes. And that robustness in processes has to work at every level, and it's not going to change just because you have a chief process officer. Okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
So there are some companies, for example, I know Philips used to be one, they used to have a process called the best process. And that best process used to be an agenda item for all the management team members. And say, in the best process, have you achieved this? And in fact, Philips was the first matrix organization in the world.
Yeah.
And that's the reason they went and developed all these processes.
Yes.
So if you want a benchmark company on process, go and visit Philips. Okay, so they have all this there. So that's what I would say. It's a thing which cuts across. It's not a standalone.
And I will build on this and then come to the team, because you talked about Philips. Philips has been one of the companies, as you said, which had the shared services.
Yeah.
And then they kind of outsourced to Infosys. And to the point which you talked about, functions and business units, one of our experiences have been that these functions and business units, because business process cut across, each function thinks of their own function, and they sometimes don't think of the process, which I'm just taking an example of finance. Okay, I've got the bills for payment, but I've not got this, I'll just keep quiet. 30 days is the credit period, can I do something differently? So can that person reach out? So what I'm really trying to put a context is, given the exposure to Philips as shared services and outsourcing, and given the comment which you made around function business units, is it not, what's your experience? Are the functions becoming silos, or they're not becoming silos? They're seamless.
Very good question. And I look at it two ways. See, in any organization and the history of business, structures divide people,
Right.
but people unite structures. Process does not unite a company.
Right.
People unite companies. We divide people into structures because we want to maximize finance, we want to maximize supply chain, etc. But if we took it to its logical extension, supply chain will want zero stock at the end of the month.
Yeah.
Sales will want 10 days stock at the beginning of the month. It will never work. And that is why the role of leadership is absolutely important. And I think some of the dangers we are getting into, because there is no trust amongst functions or senior managers, is every single process now has an SLA to it. That's not the way you can run a company. I just trust you to do the right thing. If every handshake has to be an SLA, you're not going to run any company properly. So I really think that, like culture, process and adherence to process is the day job of senior management.
Well done. Actually, Deepak comes from HR, strategic planning, business process. So you really, I know his music to you when somebody says culture, we have worked very closely. So you have been on both sides, people, the HR side, and the business process world. How do you see this? What she was saying, what are your thoughts, Is it happening or is it a challenge?
It's that I think the dynamic tension between accountability and process optimization is ultimately the where the balance lies is a choice I think that every organization kind of makes for itself. I think the struggle is, and coming particularly to Indian organizations, is that sometimes Indian organizations, this challenge to become big and beautiful, and you become big first, and then you struggle to become beautiful, and all you end up doing is putting lipstick on the gorilla. And I think that processes is something that Indian organizations need to catch hold of pretty early in their. We do a lot of work in mid-cap, and I've often told Ravi this, that whenever we talk about processes and whenever we talk about business process management, we talk about large enterprises with big levers of standardization and cost, and sort of squeezing the towel to get efficiency out of the system and make sure the back end is managed in a manner that kind of supports the business and pushes it forward. I see a huge opportunity sitting in mid-cap, where there's a huge vision to grow the business, but not the expertise to look at the back end of the organization to say how can we kind of organize this better. And many organizations come to a stage where they become big, and then they struggle to put lipstick on the gorilla and say how do we kind of find better ways of managing talent, and how do we find better ways of creating interfaces in the organization that actually work and fix our supply chain and fix the sales and marketing network. So at that point in time, I mean, typically when I'm talking about mid-cap, it's between 200 to 600-700 crores. At that point, it becomes this huge change management thing that we have grown too big and too inefficient, and that itself becomes a constraint on how do I kind of grow any further. So I think there is a dynamic tension, and I think it exists in most organizations, even in ITS, BPO. You need processes for predictability, and how does that kind of interplay with innovation and creativity is again a dynamic tension, right? Yeah. So you want process compliance because the client at the other end wants predictability of performance on every shift, on every day, on every transaction. But at the same time, you want to create process innovation because the client is expecting that if you continue to do this the same old way for the next 3 years, it's no longer working for me. And so where's the process transformation, where is the process excellence, and how are you guys kind of thinking differently about how this is to be managed? So I think there's this dynamic tension, and I think the dynamic tension cannot be managed either through structure or through process. The dynamic tension is ultimately the balance which is bought by a very proactive leadership and a culture which says, how do I manage this but not allow any one of these to become a monster that at the end of the day begins to kind of control the organization. So a couple of points, I don't know if I'm addressing your question, Ravi. I think there's a huge opportunity sitting as far as mid-cap is concerned, and so much of our attention in the country is about large databases, large organizations, standardization, cost efficiency, but there's a massive opportunity to kind of reach out to mid-cap, whether from a process management standpoint or even from an aggregation standpoint, yes. Right? So I mean, just to give an example, we were talking about outside. We work with ACMA. ACMA is 900 kind of companies starting from 100 crores going up to 4 to 5,000 crores, and there are different levels of maturity, whether of process or of leadership or of culture. How much of this conversation actually penetrates those organizations, right? Because the need for process efficiency, the need for meeting customer requirement, the need for meeting quality, cost flexibility and agility in their organizations is kind of huge. But I don't think the knowledge kind of currently exists to take a leap as far as that is concerned.
Yeah, my input on that is, I completely agree with you, Deepak. The thing is, if you really want process, the society must have a culture of discipline.
Culture of?
Discipline. And I must say, India, we don't have that. So we put a process and we break it very quickly because then we resort to all kinds of things to break it. So, for example, you go to Germany. Suppose you say, here's the plan. and they say, okay, fine, got it. 2 days later, you go and say, look, I've changed the plan. Then say, okay, change it fully and come back.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I'll not do anything. Make up your mind first. They'll not say, okay, this one I'll adjust. Let's do. They will not do that. Japan. I once went, when I was in Levers, we went to Japan on a study tour. So we're all going on the train. Me, Nitin, Sanjay Dubey, etc. So somebody says, Sanjay, ask him when we'll go to Kyoto. So Sanjay tapped the TD and said, Kyoto, what time? So that guy said, 10:42. So Sanjay turned to us and said, 10:45, 10:50. They said, no, 10:42. That's the discipline. So you need to value discipline and time if you really want that process orientation which you're talking about.
No, I think it's well said. I'll just build that and come to you then in terms of, you talked about, the discipline, and one of the things we have seen, and maybe your comments, Nitin, is how do you see process enabling discipline? And what kind of cultural requirements are there? Eventually we know, I think that we see there are 3 layers, compliance, control, discipline. Eventually that's the highest form of evolution, where people trust each other and kind of respect each other. So how do you see the business process management? I'm just coming back to what Deepak was specifically mentioning. How does it connect the discipline and the culture and to make that happen? So what your thoughts are?
So I think I'll build upon what Shiv started saying when he was talking about the fact that leaders should set the culture. I think it really starts from there, and I think it's a delight if we can achieve that. I think it's difficult to achieve that in one organization. I'm just coming down to the practical realities, and to be able to try and achieve that is across a vendor organization and a customer organization is a challenge. I'm not saying it's not possible, because I think you can define a finite problem and you can solve for it, and it's absolutely possible. But I think what the way the expectations usually are defined in our market is compliance, is adherence. I think often service providers go and talk to customers to say, let's talk about value, let's talk about moving your processes forward, let's talk about customer delight, let's talk about customer experience. But I think often when we have to sign a contract, it comes down to we are going to get measured on a set of 40 metrics, which is all right. I think, and I think we don't disagree with that, because I think at the end of the day, when you're outsourcing, you're also expecting the outsourcer to take an element of risk on your behalf. So you need a process to manage that risk. You need a process to manage your contract, and I think that works. But culturally, I think as business managers or on both sides should sort of shut away the contract, maybe look at it once a month, once a quarter, and work towards things like customer delight. So I think even service providers like us are balancing things like to what extent do we want to maintain discipline. We are constantly, I think imparting trainings with our staff to kind of say how they can delight customers, and most areas for us tend to be things like how do I improve customer experience, can I plug cost leakages, can I enhance revenue, can I improve compliance, so on and so forth. So I think these kind of tend to be levers within the realms of the process we manage. So I think discipline is extremely important. I won't take I won't give that any less weightage. I think discipline is extremely important, because I think you need repeatability and reliability. And on top of that, you need to overlay a culture where your managers and your leaders are innovating, making the processes flexible, putting in more technology. And I think you need your people to think in a manner which give better outcomes. And I think that's what I would say. So I won't sort of take the process element away from it. I would keep it there and then overlay all the other good things that are required.
Sanjay, you have both the captive shared services experience and the BPO experience. How do you see this process enabling businesses? In terms of is it really not just as a outsourcing partner, but as a holistic way? Because so if you see it from the shared services experience, what was the experience from a business process, and how do you see it from the outsourcing?
I think, Ravi, that there is a bit of a difference. I think that a bit of a difference, at least if you were to ask me, between two groups which need to interact, and here I'm saying two groups mean, let's say, a pure play third party BPO company and an internal organization which is a shared service organization. I think the level of acceptability and tolerance itself is very different. So like Nitin said, if you're signing up a contract with a third party and the third party insists that there is a minimum SLA that needs to be defined and adhered to, or else there's going to be a penalty clause built into it, that's going to be, absolutely critical in a contract. However, I'll just want to relate to a small incident now that you've asked me this question, Ravi, about when we were first migrating our businesses from American Express. Anand was my boss at that time. And I remember, we'd never heard of this term called SLA at that time. And it didn't exist because you were migrating businesses from various units of American Express into a centralized, specialized unit, which was supposed to do, servicing for the various clients that you had across the world. And we never heard of SLA. The only thing our migrating leaders at the remote end, our clients again, told us was that, you have to keep your recs clean. For accountants, you'll understand reconciliation statements because of suspense reconciliations, etc., extremely important. If there's something suspended in your recs, there's some problem happening somewhere which you are not aware of. So keep your recs clean. Over a period of time, we realized keeping your recs clean means what? And so we asked our client means what? There's this lady at the other end who came and said, every month end, you should have 0 recs. That means all your recs should have been cleared. All your suspense accounts should have been actually cleared. I remember we killed ourselves trying to get 0 recs in. And month on month, we never got 0 recs. Not just we never got 0 recs, we had hundreds and hundreds of outstanding items every month end. So finally we went back to this lady and we said, listen, we just can't get 0 recs. And what are you going to do? I mean, you're going to take back the business or what? I said, no, why are you killing yourself? We aim for 0 recs. But we are okay if you have, about whatever, 2%, 3%, which in itself in American Express digital world, I mean, the volumes are so high, 2, 3%, a few hundreds here, there won't even matter. She said, no, it doesn't matter. This amount of, wiggle room will always be there. Okay? Over a period of time, we realized that, obviously, as you know very well, recs is not just a question of numbers, it's also a question of how late they are. Over a period of time, we realized even that is stretchable. No such luxury available to us if we are doing a third-party BPO work. Processes are sacrosanct. Many organizations, we believe, do not give us the luxury of innovation, individual variation, or any kind of, out-of-the-box flight thinking, etc. Most of the third-party organizers, third-party should I say contracts are very watertight, they are very fixed, and you're not really allowed to deviate too much. I also believe that this is largely more possible in those areas where customer delight is more easily workable, for instance in terms of customer facing jobs, etc., in back end facing jobs. Many organizations we've seen actually believe that they can't take the risk of a variation from a process point of view. So lots of, but by the way, that doesn't mean that there are no innovatives or there are no initiatives at all. Yeah. There are specialist groups like process excellence, like Deepak talked about, whose sole job is to continue to look at processes and see where they can find loopholes and find places where they can evolve better and give better experience to not only the client but the ultimate customer as well.
I think you are the business leader, you are a client for, let's say, IBM today, but many companies, even in Philips. This point of you talked about is SLA so critical, but then most of the clients do insist with the outsourcing partners, or even with shared services. If you don't have an SLA, I'm not going to give you the process. So what I wanted to understand, therefore, is how do you see the expectation of the business or the leader like you, and what is really being asked for? If you are asking for SLA, you will get SLA. If you want to ask SLA plus something, maybe they will get it, hopefully. So how do you see this, I would say, dichotomy of how business leaders look at it like you and how the outsourcing partners are actually driven to sign an SLA? What is your IBM? I'm sure you will have an SLA with that.
Yeah, my personal view is that SLAs must be two-way, not one-way.
That's true. Reverse SLA is a
Absolutely.
part of the life
Okay,
today.
here's the stat and the catch. All the companies you deal with, none of the payments are on time. So you should be asking them, who is your process?
Yeah.
So I believe that true trust happens when it's two-way.
Yeah.
When any SLA or anything is one-sided, boss, subordinate, company, leader, etc., it never works.
No.
So to me, I think in a world which is more legalistic in nature today, that's why we have SLAs.
So Ravi, can I just add a dimension? So I think you have to define SLA. There's no way around it because I think that's the way to manage a contract. But I think that's the beginning of the relationship. I mean, it's not the end of the relationship there. I think take inspiration from Steve Jobs, who said that look, it's not the customer's job to tell us what he needs. So he came up with something and the world sort of bought it and he kind of did the innovation. Henry Ford, when he went and said that if you ask people what do they need, they would have said I need faster horses. Nobody would have said I need cars. But I think that's how innovation started. So I think that's the culture we are running on our side as well, where we're saying that you sign the contract, that's fine, we figure out a way to manage it. But you can't go back to the customer and ask, well, is this the only sort of expectations you have? And I think we need to kind of think on their behalf and really innovate on their behalf and really take them forward because they're really relying on us to provide them the kind of service. So if you take a payables example, processes which used to be archaic, millions of invoices, coming through every year, are now automated invoices.
Yeah.
From automated invoices, it went down to how many go first pass and how many actually require, even within the automation, how many require sort of touching manually. Within that, now we're coming up with concepts like vendor portals, reconciliation tools, which are basically, I mean, if you really ask, you're taking away cost from the cost of operations, which is a customer delight. I mean, today to kind of say that taking out cost, it's a CFO's delight. I'm sure it will be a CEO's delight as well because Shiv mentioned that cost is the only sort of predictive sort of thing. And I think today, I think the way we see it, the two most important customer expectations tend to be customer experience and cost. And as long as we are innovating on that and we are kind of moving forward on that, and you have to do that year after year after year. It's not like a one-time thing. You do it and you have to do it year after year after year.
Well, Ravi, the thought that comes to my mind, a couple of things. One is, I've seen processes being enablers. I've never seen processes being your winning strategy. So it's just not feasible. I think you need processes to make the business scalable. I mean, Sanjay will remember, if you had to hire 7,000 employees in a year, I can't do that with broken processes and with indiscipline and you have every Tuesday 300 people who are joining. You can't do that with broken processes and you can't do that with unpredictability. But I've never seen processes being your main winning strategy. If I go back and look, who were the people in our organization, even at the shop floor level, who got recognition? They got recognition for going beyond the process. I've never seen anybody get recognized for, this guy followed the process to the T. So, I really loved the interaction that I have with him or her. I mean, each and every one of those experiences has been where you've actually gone beyond the process. I remember we used to do funny stuff like, build rapport with your client in US. So we had this application that we designed. So if the guy is calling from Arizona, so the weather of Arizona will flash on your screen so you know what's the local game happening there and what's the weather today, and that helps you build rapport, etc. I'm not sure at the end of the day, well, that was great stuff, right? So I don't know how many times conversations actually started with that. I think it was the individual initiative that actually helped people move beyond. So each process is like baselining and saying, this is the minimum performance I really expect from you. But I don't know how many people who you would have considered as great performers and grown and said you would become team leader and manager and vice president really came from, let me deliver the process to the customer. This is one point. The second point is, I think our experiences have been different with continental Europe and with US. And again, Sanjay, you can vouch for that. The US companies, they wanted a relationship and a contract that was based on SLA. And they would watch you for 3 to 4 years before they would allow the relationship to kind of go beyond that. Whenever we have dealt with large continental Europe clients, whether it's Aviva or it's British Gas, I think the nature of the relationship, even from day one, was different. And I think it's the culture of these two geographies and the way they have looked at outsourcing and business processes, that I think the nature of the interaction, continental Europe, they're saying, can you show us a succession plan of, if you got 400 people on the floor for me, where is tomorrow's leadership going to come from? A US client has absolutely no interest in that, right? So that's your problem and your baby, and can you just ensure, I remember the conversations with Dell, Sanjay, that they are the 42 metrics that you have to deliver, and this month the most important thing is customer service. Next month, customer service is not important, it's call quality that is important. So if customer service scores fall, it doesn't matter. So you're constantly actually being contractually kind of managed, and that becomes the nature of the relationship and stuff. So I think the other two observations I have seen a difference between continental Europe and US, and processes have been enablers. Allow scalability. Yeah. So you can't become a 40-50,000 crore size company with broken stuff.
I would agree with that, because a process can never substitute behavior. Trust is built on behavior, it's not built on process. Okay, efficiency is built on process, and your payments might be built on that, but long-term trust is that. So for example, let's take the best mergers and acquisitions is a very good example. Do the best mergers and acquisitions follow process? No. The best mergers and acquisitions follow first trust and then process. So Warren Buffett sits with Walmart and says, I'm willing to buy this thing for you. They discuss for 2 hours, fix a price and say, now let the lawyers figure it out. How did Gillette and Procter & Gamble happen? Gillette called Lafley and said, look, I think we need to sell because we don't have a women's range, you don't have a men's range, you are better off with this. And they just shook hands and said, okay, $67 is it, let's go. Now we'll tell the lawyers how to do it. So at the fundamental, at the heart of everything is great trust. Yeah. And every time you substitute behavior and trust with process, it doesn't work.
No, well said. I think if I utilize your point and kind of shift the focus back to, let's say, India in a larger picture, and Sanjay and I have been talking about it, that in the last 20 years, India has become a global hub for IT-enabled, BPM, whichever way you call it. And in India itself, we find companies taking their own time, to adopt technology, adopt BPM, and today business process management is becoming a discipline. We have seen CIOs handling business processes, although still, as Deepak was saying, they still don't do full trust. But so the question which I wanted to kick off to the dialogue is, if we have to really grow much beyond, as a country, how do you see IT and business processes enabling the Indian organization? How do you see, where are we from a business process management, or I'm just saying, and I would surely will come to the topic of how business management cuts into the culture, because it's not just about strategy, but just to start with, where do you think we are in Indian organizations? And I think Deepak talked about SME, and let me just go back large cap. We have met with at least, we meet 50 large companies and about, 50 small companies. And we find sometimes the paradigm is pretty much the same. It's not that it is very different, people still struggle, I'm sure. So I'm just saying, from a business process management point of view, I don't see a difference between in large scale and Indian organizations and even small scale.
If you truly want this to become a profession, and you truly want this to become something bigger than where it is today, I have 2-3 suggestions. First, make it a subject which is taught in B schools.
Okay.
Second, even better, start a business process management degree.
Okay.
If it's that big,
you will do that.
that's what you should do.
It's already.
How nice of you. I think you did it.
That's what I was planning to do.
This is exactly what.
Fantastic, because that's the only way you elevate it, and then you create a stream of experts and a stream of knowledge, and then the innovation of thinking has to start with the academics and then practiced. Okay, that's how it should happen, and that's how you look at operations research, you look at marketing. That's how it happened.
No other way. Equally IT.
That's
was
it.
course.
Absolutely.
And computer sciences became.
Funny you should say that. I was reading a report a couple of weeks ago which said the reason why there is so much variety in business process language and everything that goes around it is because it's an initiative that is practitioner led and not academic led. So is there a foundation to it?
Excellent.
That has looked at
You need a base.
approaches and methodologies and said this is the right way, and which is why I flirt sometimes with the idea, even though the point you were making was, do we really need a chief process manager and what would that kind of achieve? I do sometimes flirt with the idea that in an organization, as I see particularly Indian organization, who raises his or her hand to say this is my job? So it will fall on each functional head, and ultimately the much harassed CEO has to kind of drive it. Or is there a horizontal responsibility that somewhere sits, provided you believe that there's an approach, methodology and technology to it that runs across the kind of business. Typically the kind of stuff that process excellence used to do, I don't know if it still kind of does that, it goes across different industry groups and goes across different functional groups. I do sometimes flirt with the idea that in India, one of the reasons why this hasn't made the kind of rapid progress is there's no champion. I don't find a champion for it other than the CEO within the organization. The second thing is that I sometimes again wonder, is it rapid pace? So is it a problem of high tide? That if you look at the BRIC countries and you say rapid growth, and what takes the back seat is process. Whereas if you look at economies that are perhaps not going so rapid, my hypothesis, not research, but I don't throwing it up for grabs, if you look at economies that are not growing so rapidly, perhaps the attention on process is a lot more. So is there a little bit of a settled in our mind, a luxury? I do work, like I said, with a lot of mid-cap clients, and I keep going back to mid-cap despite the fact he warns me against it. I mean, a man will keep telling me, no, I've got this opportunity right now, and so I will fix the back end of my organization when I have the time. By then, it's actually
That's when you rely on outsourcing.
too late.
That's when you rely on outsourcing.
We'll come back to mid-cap very soon.
No, don't. I think
It's as passionate as you are. I do feel India is a large country with a lot of mid-caps, and I think there's no way that we can think of even growth in India if mid-cap is not there.
Yeah, because the individual entrepreneur is a big part of our success story, and that's where this must kind of penetrate.
You talked about cost, and I think it's, of course, this culture and capability, and I think there are 2-3 questions. I know we're a little behind, but one of the things I've seen, even in American Express, which was pioneering offshoring, while cost, I've seen this happen because I've been part of it to say, offshoring happened because of cost arbitrage. I agree with people, there's no question. Having said that, the business process management, if I have to say, American Express had 2 centers, one in Phoenix and another one in Brighton, and the third one only here. It was not that they shifted all operations overnight to India. So which means they believe that process management is critical, and even today, I would say the largest number of shared services, which is captive, exists in US. I was quite happy to see those kind of statistics. And similarly, there are 370 shared services in Europe. The point is not about overseas. The point I want to kind of get across and understand is, business process management goes for 2 reasons today. One is the cost, but also for quality. And in Indian environment, how do you see that? Is cost arbitrage is not a big deal. Of course, there are opportunities to right skill mixtures, right span of control. Those are all enabling drivers. But do you see in India the focus on the quality of the process? I'm just now talking about the quality of the process, not so much about the cost of the process. And therefore, and we know cost of quality is bad, and therefore higher the quality, lower the cost. So how do you see India now? You deal with a lot of, not just bottlers and so many distributors, and how do you see and to his point, how do you see the business process management, or they manage the processor to manage cost and quality?
Yeah, so I would say, good question again. I would say that I've yet to see a company, if I even scan back 100 years of business history, who has been successful only on one strategy called cost. Right. It never works.
Right.
You can cut your cost, you need to get healthy. That can be at best a 2-year strategy. Beyond that, you never create value by cutting costs alone. You have to create something else. Okay, so in the midterm, if you're bloated, then cost is the right approach to set yourself right. But after that, it cannot be an end in itself. That's my personal belief.
Absolutely. And let me use this point back on the capability. One of the things we have realized as being part of the shared services business world and now in the practitioner world, we find that, and this is the point, we do feel business process management and capabilities have become integral. They're not seen so separately, because if they don't have capabilities to understand what it is, then the business process never takes off. And the capability has got right at the beginning, either the top or the bottom. So the point of reference, and actually I used to say, business process is strategy and capabilities being the culture to make that success actually happen. It's not just one or the other, So you talked about some of the areas in terms of how do you build this as a function or a role in India. What kind of capabilities or elements you feel we should focus on for business process management, or quality, or for the matter cost reduction, or how do you really create, enable the organizations to grow? Because today we talk about competitive advantage, growth, etc.
So in today's world, because the world is changing so fast, for many categories and industries, execution is becoming strategy. That's the raw truth.
Strategic execution.
So one of the things which I think a process like the 4DX, which I think the Covey Institute really champions, is one way of linking your purpose and your strategy and executing it well. Okay, that is something which I definitely see happening in many companies. I think scorecards are becoming more and more important. It started with Kaplan with balanced scorecard. But everybody now looks at scorecard, and if you travel with any executive, you can be sure that in his folder there's a scorecard. So scorecards are becoming important. So what we are doing is we are focusing on a few things, measuring them, and saying, look, as long as you manage these input variables right, the output will come. Okay, so a lot of time is being spent to get the process for the input variable right. Okay, and then hoping that the strategy translated into the input variable will deliver the outcome. So I think that's what most companies do.
Deepak, your thoughts on this?
No, I think I completely. There's a certain level of agility, I think, which organizations require, and the agility is both strategic as well as at the back end. So I agree. I don't think I have any value to add to the point.
Sanjay, you've been on HR as well as operations as well. So I think, how do you see that capabilities enabling, business process culture, if I can use the word?
Yeah. So Ravi, you know this extremely well, and we've held this view for a very long period of time. Capabilities and processes are hand in glove, really, because processes by themselves will, like you said, will stagnate and die, and capabilities are the infrastructure required to keep the processes alive and agile. So I don't think there is any doubt at all about the two being actually connected and interlinked, and at the very core running together to support each other. Actually, processes also build capabilities, and capabilities support processes. So I think that they are very much together.
Let me shift, Nitin, I think, back to what Deepak has been very keen. And, Intelinet and Serco, so Serco is fine, and of course global, but Intelinet has been a great organization too. And, one of the things they've done extremely well is to reach out to multiple cities across India, And the point I want to really see is, how do you think that, and then going back, how do you really see that the business process management world catching the population at the rural and multiple cities, and while there's a cost, everything, one of the biggest challenges for BP, everything will come back to cost, but I think that's one part of the story. But how do you see that enabling the India as a country, and what can be done differently?
See, first and foremost, I think it's right to acknowledge that if you're operating across 35 cities, it is a challenge to standardize the way you do things across, and we've been able to achieve it for the large part. I think one of the ideas we were discussing is whether companies should have a chief process officer.
Okay.
Now, I won't dismiss any idea because any idea is a good idea, and I think we've had a chief process officer for a time, and I think what did we expect the chief process officer to achieve? Now, and I think we started with the belief that what is going to happen to services is what happened to manufacturing in terms of standardization of processes, bringing in efficiencies, and I think that's what our sort of thinking was, that it's services eventually will head there. It will become leaner, and all the principles and practices that got applied to manufacturing to make it, if you look at companies like the German automotive companies or any other manufacturing companies, they've kind of really built their manufacturing processes very well, and services will be there eventually. So I think from a chief process officer perspective, I think the evolution started by saying that can we disseminate knowledge around doing or operating or measuring our processes in a consistent manner across all our centers. Are our people trained well enough? Because I think for any innovation to happen, I think our people need to be trained well enough. Our thinking needs to be built into people to kind of to innovate and get better. So are we promoting a culture wherein people are allowed to think? Are we engaging their hearts and minds in a manner that they are aligned to our customers' goals, they are aligned to our goals? So I think it's all, and I think we've found a lot of value in having that position and building that culture, because I think to change a culture in an organization, and to build knowledge in a large percentage of our population, I think it absolutely look at the kind of interventions that are required and sort of build a culture around that. So it's not an idea I would not dismiss. I mean, it's not one size fits all, but it's I think a lot of organizations will find merit, especially these service companies, to have a position like a chief process officer.
Deepak, why don't you talk about your experience with the SME segment and what?
I've already, I think, talked very passionately. No, it's the SME segment, I think, is I think pregnant with opportunity as far as this is concerned. I think they're growing very rapidly. They're led by people who have a vision, and I think it's the back end of those organizations that just needs to get fixed. But the know-how doesn't reach, technologies don't reach, networks don't reach, approaches, methodologies don't reach, and so I think there's a huge opportunity out there, and I think that beyond SME, I think there's an opportunity for what I call process innovation, which is standardization. Even deciding what deserves to get standardized in our organization and what should be let go of to allow a certain level of empowerment and innovation is somebody putting a design hat on and thinking about organizational performance and how do we deliver value to the customer. It's not a decision which a CTO or CIO can take or a chief process manager can take. And I think so when we start with a heavy boot and start standardizing everything in the organization, I think I think it's short-sighted. There's a design hat somebody needs to put in to say, how does this organization deliver value? And therefore in this organization, this part can be standardized, digitized, and we all got to do it the same way. Don't try and reinvent the wheel. And this is how we need to drive innovation in this organization, but I think this is how we add value. So I think that design hat somebody needs to kind of put on.
I have an observation here, Ravi. Sorry. Yeah. I think it's stage 2, Deepak, because whenever you're setting up a redesigned organization or a redesigned process or whatever, I think the most essential process that you can do is, thing that you can do is standardize, create a discipline, etc. And once having set up a threshold of standardization, then you can move to allowing freedom and get innovation into it by obviously controlled innovation. And my belief is that it's stage 2. Process standardization, process control has to be the bedrock on which this can be allowed.
So let me do 2 rapid round questions and we finish. Shiv, to start with you, I think And of course, the same question, we'll just take your inputs. We talked about either or, either SLA or otherwise and so on. One of the things all of us have believed in is the Jim Collins and, the genius of the and, as we call it, tyranny of the or. And as Nitin said, the manufacturing industry is proven much beyond doubt. If you need to have standardization, you need to have customization. It's not that you have only this or that. You need to see how do you blend it, So the question to all of us very quickly is, how do you see these two things coexisting from an Indian organization point of view, for making sure that quality is enhanced and cost is coming down, as an and paradigm? We talked about service levels, is it required, customer delight is required, but to me, as you said, service levels and customer delight are required. It's difficult to achieve, but we need to shoot for.
So again, from all my experience of brands and this thing, see, marketeers and companies do not recognize truly when their quality has gone off, because they're always comparing themselves to what they did before. But the paradigm of quality has changed in the consumer's mind based on experience across many industries and not just your own category.
Absolutely.
Okay. So if there's one thing I would not give up is quality. Like for example, we have put quality as one of our top priorities this year and said, come what happens, what else? And in order to really live that, you have to give the people the full freedom to say, if this is not in my eyes up to quality, I will stop it. Okay, whether it's a plant manager, whether it's a sales manager, whoever it is. Okay, so the Indian consumer is far more discerning on quality than most of the consumers. We notice that. You speak to any multinational company, the maximum number of complaints they get is from Indian consumers. You can check this with anybody. The Indian consumer goes aspiration, quality, price in urban India, and goes price, aspiration, quality in rural India. But he will never give up quality.
Deepak, standardization and customization.
And yeah, you answered your own question. You see, the and is what is, raise the game to the next level. So the linear way of the old thinking that if I improve quality, there is a cost to it, and if I do this, then if there is a that to it, I think it's all dead and gone. And dealing with ambiguity and having the agility to deal with ambiguity is what, it's not built into process, it's not built into leadership. It's the totality of how an enterprise is managed. So yes, you will want process and you will want innovation, and I want to get both delivered. And that's the culture of the organization I want. So
Within quick time.
Yeah, so I think I've learned from Shiv that I think culture is really important, and that's so I think you need to have a quality culture. I won't take anything away from standardization because it's necessary, because once you're standardized, you can ensure that your organization is kind of taking leaps forward, rather than parts of the organization kind of innovating and progressing and others remaining where they are. So I think standardization is important so that we can build a common culture, and then we also need to have the culture of innovation. I think that's what all of us are saying, that it's absolutely necessary.
Sanjay?
Completely agree with everybody, absolutely. Innovation is absolutely an important aspect before the process comes to a grinding halt and dies away. However, a process standardization, as I just said, is absolutely necessary as a bedrock. Standardization, certainly important, and then of course, all of it is defined by the culture that you set into place. Innovation culture is extremely important, but should be, in my opinion, should be controlled. You can't have everybody at the grassroots level wanting to do things differently, because then you will have 500 people and 500 different ways to do things.
The last question, I think then we will take a couple of questions from the audience. Really to say, we do feel that Indian organizations have not got to the urgency to make a difference in terms of, I'm taking large, small, of course, they need the support. What we call from a technology and business process perspective, as much as they can actually do, there is in a sense of inertia, while, there's some action happening across, in terms of business process, large and so on. What is one thing you feel that we can do, Indian organizations can do, or Indian, community can do differently to spur ourselves into action and make sure that, we are able to upgrade our, our own organization, quality, economy, whatever you want to call it as.
Okay, I give you a out-of-the-box idea.
Please.
On this, okay. India has the maximum number of listed companies. We have about 5,800 odd. I think Wall Street is 5,600 or so. The catch about the Indian list is 66% of the companies are family owned compared to anywhere else. We are the highest in the world. Okay. So all the family owned companies will open up to capital investment and infusion. And the first place they will go is a PE fund or somebody like that.
Right.
Okay, you should go sell. See, when a PE fund comes into a company, what do? Quality of management is what they talk.
Correct.
They don't talk quality of process.
Yes.
So you should go pitch with the PE funds to tell them how the quality of process will actually deliver more value to that company. Start there.
Thank you, Veera.
Great idea.
Deepak, from Indian context,
Great idea.
any ideas you would like to add?
No, I think I think discipline is an important word, and I think I see to some extent our path is a little bit evolutionary,
Yeah.
and I think we are getting there, and I don't have worries about the future.
Okay.
I think any discussion you can't miss the customer. So I think you got to keep the customer first, and then build your strategy around that. So that's what I would say. I think whether it's standardization, whether it's value that you want to bring to the market, I think you got to keep customer first.
Sanjay, to finish it all.
No, I do not want to disagree or make any further comment. I think all of it is said is absolutely, it's important that we work through all of the various rumbles that one has to go through, whether they are cost rumbles or whether they are cultural or whether they are process definition, etc. I don't think there is a single answer to any of it. All need to be worked together. Certainly need